Chapter 5400. Jojo. He lowered his head to tighten her cloak before hugging her tightly. It won't happen again. Arbor pursed her small lips and punched his back. These past 2 days, Mother has been nagging me, saying that I don't know how to take care of a child, and that I'm unreliable. She didn't see you. You're even more unreliable. Emolian quickly promised. Next time, I'll definitely be reliable, extremely reliable. Xiaomu hummed in response and nodded proudly. All right, then I'll forgive you this time on behalf of my son. When did you notice that he was missing? Emolian asked curiously. A minute before you woke up. Emolian. He looked at her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Then aren't you the same as me? What's the same? Okay, not the same. She really was a tsundere baby, bristling as soon as she was mentioned. Emolian didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he quickly reached out to pacify her. You're reliable. You're the best mother in the world. The little stoic felt more at ease and nodded with a okay. Of course. In the dark night, a figure flashed in front of them. A pair of bright eyes on a pitch-black face smiled at them. Master, this way. The two people walked hand in hand under the moonlight for about half a quarter of an hour, before they couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. What was going on? They really wanted to ask. How did their son run all the way from the Eastern Palace's main hall to this remote courtyard? Both of them tensed up and didn't speak. However, Huifeng said very understandingly, Master, little master is especially awesome. When I was crouching on the tree, I saw him float out of the bedroom's window and float all the way here. He didn't pause at all. He also didn't come down to rest. We encountered a wild cat on the way. This subordinate was afraid it would bite little master. So before I could do anything, I saw that cat suddenly fly out with its 4 hooves upside down. Huifeng pointed at the roof across from them. It's over there. As parents, their feelings were a bit complicated as they looked up at the roof that Huifeng was pointing at. Sure enough, he saw a multicolored kitten curled up on the roof, trembling and screaming pitifully. The little stoic's mouth twitched, and she expressionlessly said, Take it down. Alrighty. Huifeng suddenly leaped onto the roof and brought the kitten down in a few moves. Sir Jojo and Prince Emo looked at each other with complicated expressions. Their own son had sneakily floated out of the main hall. And as parents, they actually didn't know anything. This was really the biggest joke in the world. When the two arrived at the entrance of the small Buddha hall, 2 hidden guards stepped forward and pushed the door open, bowing to invite the two inside. The 2 of them stepped through the door, only to see 2 rows of faint candlelight illuminating the room. The room was burning with silver charcoal, but it didn't seem cold. A large bed was placed next to the praying mats in front of the shrine. There were 2 mattresses and 1 mattress. It looked really thick and warm. Their son was lying on Empty's stomach, and the 3 little imps were sprawled out in their sleep. Empty's fist was pressed against the little monkey's face, and the little monkey's feet were stepping on Guangguang. Guangguang was curled up in the bedding next to them, not caring about his head, and exposing half of his butt. This row of sleeping postures was truly incomparably ecstatic. Arbor couldn't resist chuckling. Looking at these comical little guys, all the anger in his heart disappeared without a trace. Emolian looked at him with a smile in her phoenix eyes. Chapter 5401. The 2 of them walked up and adjusted the children's sleeping postures. They wanted to reach out to hold baby Mo, but they discovered that the little monk was tightly protecting him with both hands. Emolian originally wanted to gently pry open the empty hands, but she discovered that his brows were twitching, as if he was about to wake up. Arbor tugged at her and said softly, Let's go out first. The 2 of them lit up the silver charcoal fire a little before walking out hand in hand. After closing the door to the small Buddha hall, they couldn't help but smile at each other. Huifeng walked up with a grin and said, Master, little master is amazing. He's such a small baby. So where do you think all these things came from? He pointed at the empty pots and plates that several hidden guards carried over, and said with a chuckle, Little master, and the other 3 brought out the remaining half after they were full. I even suspect that they purposely brought it out to reward us. Emolian's mouth twitched. It was obvious. Otherwise they wouldn't have brought it out. These children were all shrewd. Arbor glanced back at the small Buddha hall in amusement. You don't know. But after they were full, little master took out a large quilt and mattress, and went to sleep on the floor. The hidden guards were stupefied at that time. They really didn't expect that little master, who was still so young, could move soup, water, quilt and mattress into his inner world just like that. But the problem was, when did he take these things? Emma waved her hand, dismissing Huifeng and the others. She turned to look helplessly at Jojo. Wife, is there something you haven't told your husband? Arbor blinked and coughed lightly. It's not a big deal. It's just that I only discovered it recently. Our son seems to be able to enter and exit the star domain at will. Chocho told me in private. Our son isn't like you guys, who need to carry a branch of the sacred tree by his side. After leaving the sovereign capital, he can't enter the star domain. Our son seems to be able to enter the star domain at will wherever he goes. He can also summon holy water, holy wood and holy earth. I just don't know if he can see a vast starfield in his dantian. Emma widened her eyes and looked at her little wife in disbelief. Then what about him? Arbor nodded sincerely and patted Emma waist sympathetically. He should be the richest baby in the world. Emma didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at her. She smiled and joked. My dear Qiao, then wouldn't all your hard work over the years have been in vain? You're just making a wedding dress for your son. A son doesn't need a wedding dress. Okay. Everything my Joe says makes sense. Arbor blinked, leaned into his arms and said softly, Actually, after knowing this, I'm very happy. Although our little dumpling has already broken through to the 10th level of the divine realm at such a young age, he is truly too small and too weak. Sometimes when I look at him, it seems that anyone can break his thin arm with just a finger. Now that the situation is tense and uncertain, danger lurks everywhere. I feel much more at ease knowing that little dumpling has the star domain to protect himself. At the very least, if bad people came to capture him, he could immediately hide in the star domain, couldn't he? Jojo, be good. Don't worry, okay? Emma lowered his head and kissed her gently on the forehead. With you and me around, we will protect little dumpling. We definitely won't let anything happen to him. Jojo, don't worry too much, okay? Chapter 5402. Arbor nodded. Emma, now I can truly understand Long Chiyun's mentality back then. Back then, she tried her best to conceal the truth and didn't tell me anything, Arbor said with a faint sigh. Actually, she didn't want me to come to the divine continent. As a mother, she only wanted me to let go of the burden of hatred and grow up peacefully and obediently. Even if she left me in a small farmhouse, as long as I could grow up happily, I think she would be perfectly satisfied. She didn't ask for you to be rich and noble, only for you to be healthy for the rest of your life. This was Mother's initial wish. Seeing her in his arms, Emma gently caressed her cheek and said, Perhaps all the mothers in the world think this way. Arbor tilted her little head and glanced at him. Your son strolls outside in the middle of the night. This is a very bad habit. How do you plan to educate him? Emma didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even if I reason with him, he probably won't listen in his current state. Besides, even if I reason with him with my fists, you won't agree. If he dared to lay a finger on his son, with his wifey's protective personality, it was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't be beaten to death. Forget it. Arbor took out a spirit-binding rope from her inner world. How about tying him to me tonight? Emma was speechless. After a long while, she said in amusement, I don't think this little spirit-binding rope can bind our son. Arbor blinked and nodded in all seriousness. She raised her hand and patted her husband's chest. Husband, then make a rope that can bind him. This important task could only be left to the divine weapon master in front of her. Emma didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Inside the Ministry of Justice's dungeon, at the end of the corridor, in the innermost and dark prison cell, Su Shitao's hair was disheveled. He pounded on the prison cell door and shook it vigorously as he roared. Where is everyone? Where did they all die to? You bastards! How dare you treat me like this? Sooner or later, I will put all of you to death by 1,000 cuts. Princess Consort Zheng was sitting cross-legged in the cell adjacent to hers. Although his face was dark and gloomy in the cell, At least his clothes were still clean and tidy. Unlike Su Shitao, who had been jumping up and down in the cell for the past 2 days, no one paid any attention to her. Instead, she had made a mess of herself. Su Shitao smashed the prison door for a long time. But seeing that it didn't budge, he panted and fell to the ground. He pounded the wet grass under him and screamed angrily, "That bitch! How long are you going to keep us here? None of this has anything to do with me. It has nothing to do with me." She simply hated it too much. The whole thing clearly had nothing to do with her. But in the end, with just a few words from that slut, she was thrown into such a dark dungeon, never to see the light of day again. What was she doing? Just because she was the crown prince consort, did she think that she could cover the sky with one hand and make everyone who didn't like her suffer? Su Shitao pounded the prison cell hatefully. He suddenly turned his head and looked at Princess Consort Zheng, who was sitting steadily in the neighboring cell. He simply couldn't vent his anger. Su Shitao raised her nose and eyes, and she couldn't help but shriek, "Shi Yongyan, you're actually very calm, huh? Heh, you didn't scream or jump these past few days. You ate whatever food was given to you and drank whatever porridge was given to you. You even lived quite comfortably." Chapter 5403. Su Shitao was on the verge of a breakdown, but his good sister-in-law was calmer and more composed than anyone else, as steady as Mount Tai. This was the greatest irony in the world. Compared to this sister-in-law, Su Shitao felt that she was practically a born clown. She hopped here and there all day, but in the end, not only was she of no help, she even became a laughingstock for this sister-in-law every day. Although her sister-in-law didn't say it, she must despise her in her heart. Su Shitao shouted harshly, "Sister-in-law, I'm not criticizing you. After all, your maternal family is a reputable and prestigious Shi family in Dragon Flame City. After this happened, look at yourself. What did you get? Did your maiden family send anyone to visit you? Did they send you some food and a change of clothes? Nothing at all. After we entered the prison, all our spirit weapons and treasured clothes were plundered. Even our inner worlds were sealed. Every day, we can only live with grievances. We can't eat enough and sleep well. Has your maiden family ever cared for you in the slightest? Nothing at all, right? To think that you can still live so calmly. Aren't you the least bit anxious?" Seeing that Shi Yongyan didn't say anything, Su Shitao was so angry that she kicked the wooden pillar of the adjacent prison cell and shouted in exasperation, "What are you so calm about? You've long been abandoned by the Shi family. If I were you, I wouldn't be able to keep up the pretense. The Shi family doesn't want you. My big brother doesn't want you either. You're really a failure as a person." Su Shitao seemed to have gone mad as she mocked and ridiculed the silent Princess Consort Zheng. Princess Consort Zheng frowned and said indifferently, "Are you done scolding? I advise you to save your energy and have a good rest. We don't know how long we have to stay here. We might have to stay here for the rest of our lives. What you're doing is completely meaningless." Su Shitao's entire body stiffened, and the malicious smile on her face abruptly froze. "Impossible." Her shriek almost pierced Princess Consort Zheng's eardrums. Princess Consort Zheng knitted her brows in discomfort and shot a glance at the agitated Su Shitao. Do you think your big brother will still come and save you?" Princess Consort Zheng's expression was calm as usual, as if she had already seen through everything. "That day, I followed the Crown Prince's secret guard back to King Zheng's mansion. After the secret guards broke through the defense line and rushed in, your big brother had already disappeared. Your father and mother have been taken away. Xiao Wei and Mrs. Lin also left. Do you know what this means?" Princess Consort Zheng sneered. "It's not that I'm an abandoned chess piece. Including you and I, are all abandoned pawns." Su Shitao's body stiffened and trembled. He shook his head and cried out anxiously, "No, that's impossible. 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 I don't believe it. I don't believe it." Su Shitao roared. "Even if my big brother gave up on me, my parents wouldn't treat me like this." Princess Consort Zheng looked at her mockingly and smiled coldly at her. "Su Shitao, do you still not understand? Your father, your mother, and your elder brother, are the most selfish people in the world. They would disregard their own safety to save you? Just think about it in your dreams. Right now they can't wait to hide, so how could they possibly show themselves? Princess Consort Zheng harumphed. The crown prince has already led people to raid the entire Prince Zheng estate. But did you know? Not a single valuable item in the estate was found. Chapter 5404. What does this mean? Princess Consort Zheng gazed coldly at Su Shitao and said word by word. It means that they already knew that the crown prince would bring people here to clean up, so they packed their bags and prepared to flee. It's just that this list of escapees doesn't include me, much less you. You are merely a pawn in their hands, to be discarded once they're done using you. Shut up. Su Shitao yelled angrily, trembling from head to toe. His entire body was trembling uncontrollably. She rushed to the wooden pillars of the neighboring cell and viciously kicked those thick pillars as she raged hysterically. You're spouting nonsense. You're lying to me, you're lying to me. However, Princess Consort Zheng sat there motionlessly and glanced coldly at her before softly spitting out. You're so pitiful. Make a detailed inventory of everything, and make a list. Dugu Ling leisurely stepped over a patch of withered yellow grass, his gaze landing on a row of servants who were in the midst of taking inventory of goods. On the hillside, there were boxes of supplies. The accountant was holding an account book and leading a few capable servants. They were shuttling back and forth among the supplies, quickly counting the items. Eldest young Sir Qin curiously walked over with young Sir Omega Kotoku and glanced around. Second brother, I didn't expect that you would be able to gather so many things from a trip to King Zheng's estate. Dugu Ling couldn't help but giggle when he heard this. That King Zheng personally said that he didn't want these things. Rather than benefiting that Prince Mo, why don't we strike first and gain the upper hand? Eldest young Sir Qin blinked. How can you do this? Dugu Ling turned around and looked at this eldest young sir like he was looking at an idiot. Young sir, many of our underground money houses and shops have been raided and smashed by the crown prince and his men recently. Our losses are also very disastrous. These things are merely a drop in the bucket, and we might not be able to make up for everything. The eldest young sir sighed as he fanned himself. You should at least leave something for the crown princess. This way, if everything is raided, won't she have nothing left? Dugu Ling's mouth twitched. He simply didn't want to continue speaking with this eldest young sir. Omega Kotoku said coldly, present a gift. That's true. The eldest young master nodded. Jojo just gave birth to a child. Logically speaking, as his uncles, we should give him a generous gift. Dugu Ling looked at the sky speechless. Brothers, what is the relationship between us? He fought openly and secretly with the crown prince, wreaking havoc and fighting for resources. When it came to the young crown princess, everything became a mess. If the patriarch knew about this, he would probably be so angry that he would jump 3 feet high from his stool. Young master, the inventory is almost done. The bookkeeper stepped forward and respectfully bowed to the young masters. Then he presented an account book. Second young master took it and skimmed through it. Then, he took the pen from the accountant's hand and ticked something off on the ledger. Pick it out and sort it out. Send it to the Eastern Palace. The accountant glanced at second young master in bewilderment and said cautiously, His Highness the Crown Prince didn't find anything useful in the King Zheng estate a few days ago. If we send such a generous gift over, wouldn't it be a bit cough? A slap to the Crown Prince's face? Eldest young master waved his fan with a grin and said in unison with Omega Kotoku, Precisely a slap to his face. Did this pig-like crown prince think that he could raid anywhere? Let him pounce on nothing. Let him not raid. Let him stomp his feet. Let him be angry. Chapter 5405. The Qin Estate's eldest young master and second young master present gifts. 2 bottles of pure jade heavenly dragon pills, 3 bloodwood roots, 1 smoke billowing cloud rope, 1 green feather zither, a pair of heaven winding silk hoops, a pair of mountain snow deer cubs. Mo Lian expressionlessly sat in the main hall's main hall as he listened to the servants report each gift. His eyes contained a cold glint as he faintly stared at the long list of gifts that had nearly fallen to the ground. The servant reporting the gifts only felt that His Highness the Crown Prince's gaze was touching. He hurriedly wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead with his sleeve, swallowed, and continued to recite for nearly an hour. Finally he read, "An additional 50 million spirit coin cards." After reporting the gifts, the Eastern Palace servant didn't even dare to raise his head. He knelt on the ground and held the list, not even daring to breathe loudly. Even from such a distance, he could feel His Highness the Crown Prince's displeasure. At this time, if he dared to provoke His Highness, he would most likely die. Sir Jojo leisurely walked in with the baby in his arms. He felt the stifling atmosphere as soon as he stepped into the hall. The little eunuchs and palace maids of the Eastern Palace all hung their heads low and breathed softly, as if they were afraid of angering the man sitting at the head of the table. Jojo's Lotus. Arbor walked up and looked at him in confusion. Why did he look so depressed? Who provoked him? Seeing that he didn't speak, Arbor stuffed the baby in his arms into his hands. Hold the baby. Emo Lien held the baby with one hand and pulled her to sit beside him with the other. With a cold expression, he waved at the servant kneeling below with the gift list. Leave. The servant acted as if he had been pardoned and hurriedly kowtowed to His Highness the Crown Prince. He stood up with the gift list in his hands and bowed before retreating. That person is holding a long list. What is it? It's a gift for Jojo. Arbor blinked and shifted his small body to nudge him. Who's giving Jojo a gift? Mother did mention to me that she wanted to hold a 1-month-old banquet for the child. But it hadn't been held yet, had it? The invitations for the banquet had not been sent out yet. How could there be people coming to the capital to give Jojo a gift? Who was so considerate? Emo Lien's entire body emitted a chilly aura. She said in a low voice, "Who else could it be? Those two brothers." Jojo tilted his head and thought for a while. He frowned and said, "Chindo Omega Kotoku?" Yes. These two bastards hid outside Dragonflame City and did not show up, but they were up to no good every other day. Did she think he would be angry about this? Wasn't it just that he was a step slower than them, and the items in King Zheng's residence were picked up by those two grandsons? As for being so complacent and sending people to deliver gifts, it was probably to slap him in the face. They wanted to tell him, "Don't be complacent. The contest has just begun. You raided the Qin estate, but we will retaliate. We will empty the entire King Zheng's residence before you do. We will make you angry, make you cry, make you suffer, and make you angry." What a shameless pair. Arbor arched in his arms. "Jojo's Lien, you're angry." "No." Emo Lien replied stiffly. Arbor rolled his eyes and put a hand on his chin. "I'm so angry" is written all over your face. Emo Lien was indeed angry. It had been so many years, but those two brothers still did not give up. What, were they still planning to steal his woman? Jojo would not like the two of you. If there was anything, there would have been something already. Humph. Chapter 5406. I didn't expect those two brothers to be such bad people. But the gifts they've sent time and time again aren't bad. Arbor nodded emotionally as he flipped through the long list of gifts. Emo Lien lowered his eyes, and the corner of his mouth silently twitched. Our three states and their heavenly fate organization are like fire and water. We are irreconcilable, so why do they keep sending me gifts? Arbor put down the gift list and straightened his back to look at Emo Lien, but he called out Kai Shio Kai Chi. Carefully inspect the gifts they send over several times. It's the Crown Princess. The young Crown Princess turned to look at Prince Emo and said with a frown, "I wonder if they're up to something. But it's strange. Although they're not very good people, the gifts they send over are quite proper, as if they've never tampered with them." Emo Lien couldn't help but be taken aback. She then asked in exasperation, "Could it be that you've had people carefully inspect the gifts sent by eldest Qin's Omega Kotoku more than once all these years?" Arbor nodded with a solemn expression. Aside from Brother Duan Yu's, the other gifts have to be carefully inspected. How would she know if there was anything fishy in the gifts that those people had given her? Emo Lien, what was going on? Why did Duan Yu seem to be everywhere? This man was so annoying. Jojo. Prince Emo, who was holding a cub, turned his anger into joy and looked at her with a grin. "Do you know why they sent you gifts?" Arbor nodded solemnly, disdain flashing through his eyes. "To make things difficult for me. To make me unhappy, angry and furious. I won't fall for their tricks. She would just accept the gifts and not think about anything else that would affect her mood. Emolien. If those two fools from the Qin estate knew Jojo's answer, they would probably cry themselves to death. It wasn't a matter of a day or two that the little fellow had a super high IQ and a negative EQ. Jojo, actually Sir Qiao Qiao waved her small hand and hugged Emolien's arm as she said, "You mustn't fall for their tricks. Those two bad guys gave me those things just to drive a wedge between us. He wants to make us hate each other. You won't fall for it, will you?" The little stoic swept a glance at Emolien and asked suspiciously. Emolien was really speechless. He looked at her for a long time, then pulled her into his arms and lowered his head to take 2 bites. "Why are you so annoying? What did he mean by falling into a trap within a trap?" He was both amused and angry at the same time. "She likes you. After all these years, this guy really didn't feel anything at all. Should he be happy or worried? This little guy was so defenseless. Fortunately, he made the first move. I'm so muddle-headed. I don't even know when I've been tricked." Sir Jojo was enraged and punched him on the head. He shouted angrily, "What nonsense are you babbling in front of our son?" She was a mother now, so she had to establish a lofty image and prestige in front of her son. Emolien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He lowered his head and nibbled on her lips again. "Punishing you." Arbor was flustered and exasperated. "You want to rebel?" Emolien only spat out one word when he felt a slight warmth on his knee. Fuck. This little imp was really up to mischief whenever he saw his dad. He lowered his head to look at his son's expressionless face and pinched Jojo's puffy cheeks. "Stop fooling around. Your son pooped." Chapter 5407. Eat Dorado. Emolien grumbled as he tirelessly changed his son's diaper and washed his little butt. "Hubby, it's been hard on you." Jojo stood a little further away and looked sympathetically at Jojo's lotus. She didn't know if it was out of habit, but her son could always defecate smoothly in front of her husband. This was probably a husband's special talent, right? Emolien looked back at her and shook her head in amusement. "Jojo, you can't even keep that gloating look on your face. Was that so?" Arbor raised her hand to touch her little face. Hubby must be tricking her. She clearly had a stoic little face and no expression at all. "Jojo, you said before that little fur ball can enter and leave the star sector freely?" Arbor nodded. "Yes, but I don't think I've ever seen him go in and out." Arbor was slightly taken aback when she heard this. She thought for a moment and said, "Although I haven't seen him before, since Chocho said so, it shouldn't be false." Emolien looked at Arbor. Arbor took a few steps forward and looked at the baby, who was wrapped in her husband's blanket again. She blinked and said, "Little fur ball, if you can go in and out of the star sector, why don't you perform for mommy?" With that, the child in front of her disappeared. Arbor wasn't mentally prepared. When she saw her son disappear, her heart tightened, and she hurriedly looked into the star sector. On the hillside of Paradise Planet, he saw the baby lying on the ground. Arbor heaved a long sigh of relief and hurriedly said, "Little furball, come out." Sure enough, baby Emo appeared in front of the couple and lay obediently on the small round table, as if he had never disappeared in front of them. Arbor had a proud expression on her face as she tugged at Emolien's sleeve and called out softly, "Jojo's lotus, did you see that? Xiao Tuanzi can understand my words. He can understand. The one in front of you is a baby at the 10th level of the divine realm. Naturally, it is impossible for him to be mentioned in the same breath as an ordinary person." Emolien rubbed the little stoic's head in amusement and said softly, "It's indeed not bad that he can enter and leave the star domain on his own. But this way, we might not be able to keep this little imp locked up in the future. So, you have to make a rope to tie him up as soon as possible." Xiaomu patted Emolien's back in all seriousness and said in all seriousness, "I'll have to rely on hubby for everything." Emolien was speechless. She lowered her head and rubbed her forehead. "Let's take action tonight. Let's go to the ruined temple in the western suburbs to investigate." Previously, our people stopped at the outskirts of the thatched forest on the eastern peak. It's said that there's a Baihu town up ahead. I wonder how it's doing now. Jojo naturally knew what Emolien was worried about. After all, wherever heavenly fate passed, it would be a mess. They had built so many underground bases in the past, and devoted themselves to breeding zombies, as well as mutated species of demonic cultivators and superhumans. It was hard to say what would happen to that Baihu town. Previously, Yuan Maui said that she would use a drop of blood to feed Sapling's fragment every 3 days. Arbor's face darkened when she said this. I wonder if Sapling's fragment will be contaminated by that woman's dirty blood. She was a bit worried when she thought of this, but Sapling couldn't sense the fragment's exact location right now, so there was nothing she could do. Let's go check it out tonight. Arbor pinched her son's little paw through the blanket. Put the children on Paradise Planet, and let Sapling play with them for a while. Sleep soundly, catch up on sleep tomorrow. Chapter 5408. At night, after the two of them made arrangements for the children, they quietly left the Eastern Palace and rushed toward East Peak Mountain hand in hand. The two of them used a transportation talisman and arrived near East Peak Mountain in a flash. Looking at East Peak Mountain up close, Arbor couldn't help but be slightly speechless. Duanmu, little fatty, and the others ran here every day to undergo the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation. Look, half of the mountain was flattened by the lightning and fire tribulation. Sir Jojo harumphed. I knew Heavenly Law, that old geezer, wasn't a good person. Look at this mountain. How much force did it use to strike little fatty and the others to cause the mountain to be flattened? Emolian couldn't help but be speechless upon hearing this. Heavenly Law reckoned that it was also quite difficult. After encountering so many people lining up to undergo the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation in succession, it had probably been swamped with work during that time when Arbor turned around. She saw her husband's small, indescribable expression. The little stoic wrinkled her nose and cast him a glance. What could it be that you still feel that Heavenly Law isn't easy? Emolian quickly shook his large head vigorously and said repeatedly, how could that be? Heavenly Law, that old geezer, doesn't know what's good for him. What's there to pity? Jojo, hubby will always be on your side. Sir Jojo finally nodded in satisfaction. Where should we go now? Emolian was about to speak, but he suddenly grasped Arbor's arm and turned around to cast a chilly glance into the night. A black night bird suddenly flapped its wings and fluttered past them from the treetops beside them. This place is quite strange, Emolian said softly to his wifey. I'll hold your hand. Follow me properly and don't run around. Arbor couldn't resist rolling her eyes at him and muttered softly, I never run around. Emolian couldn't help but laugh when he heard this, and he raised his hand to rub her nose. Stop bragging. I don't know who it is, but he often runs away in the middle of training. Arbor pursed his lips and thought, I didn't do it on purpose. Most of the time, it was quite difficult for her as well. Perhaps she would encounter some kind of opportunity out of nowhere. In short, don't leave my side. Emolian grabbed her little hand and turned to remind her. We don't know what dangers lie ahead. Don't be rash. Who's impatient? Your whole family is impatient. Sir Qiao Qiao glared at Crown Prince Emo with a huff. The latter smiled at her good-naturedly and held her hand as they walked towards the mountain path of the East Peak. In just a moment, 3 black-clothed men rushed out from the mountain path. The leader cupped his fists and bowed to Prince Emo. Greetings, Your Highness, Crown Princess. Behind him was a man and a woman. The woman's eyes flashed as she followed the man beside her and silently bowed. Arbor glanced at them and found that they were 3 familiar faces. They were the Dou family's eldest young master Dou Fengmian, second young master Dou Fenghua, and third young Miss Dou Fengqi. These 3 people had clearly deliberately waited here for a long time and made a special trip for the 2 of them. Emolian frowned and glanced at them indifferently. Were the 2 young masters of the Dou family waiting for us here? The Dou family's eldest young master Dou Fengmian hurriedly stepped forward and bowed again. He said humbly, reporting to Your Highness, there have been strange noises in Maolin town recently. Previously, our family had already sent many people to investigate and are more familiar with the path and environment there. We specially waited here and are willing to lead the way for Your Highness, Crown Princess. Chapter 5409. They saw the Crown Prince and his wife looking at them with a slightly hesitant expression. Dou Fengmian hurriedly added, "To tell you the truth, the Dou family only discovered it by chance a while ago. His Highness sent people to keep an eye on the ruined temple outside the thatched forest. Since it's a place that even His Highness the Crown Prince is keeping an eye on, it can't be ignored." Dou Fengmian sighed. The family immediately sent people to investigate carefully. They wouldn't have known if they hadn't investigated. But once they did, they were shocked. It turned out that the ruined temple in the thatched forest near Dongfeng Mountain was actually Zhaoguang's old headquarters. The Dou family had always believed that no one lived in that ruined temple. Who knew that it actually hid such a big secret? Dou Fengqi pursed her lips and muttered, "Big brother, if we continue talking, those people in the town might really escape first." Right. Dou Fengmian hurriedly nodded. "Can you two talk as we walk?" Prince Mo and Sir Jojo looked at each other and exchanged glances. They nodded and followed the three people from the Dou family toward the thatched forest. "Our Dou family has been keeping an eye on Maolin town for more than a month. Now I feel that this situation is no longer something that our small Dou family can control," Dou Fengmian whispered. "On weekdays, we can see the townspeople of Baihu town going out to hunt, or buy things in the morning and afternoon. In the past few days, we haven't seen anyone go in or out at all. The entire town seems to have fallen into a deep sleep, without any signs of life." As they walked, the second young master of the Dou family, Dou Fenghua, explained the strangeness of the situation to the crown prince and his wife. The two of them looked at each other and clasped their hands tightly together. It seems that the situation really isn't good. Soon, they arrived outside the forest under the guidance of the three people from the Dou family. Maolin town, which consisted of 100 households, appeared deathly still and extremely quiet under the cover of night. You could practically hear the sound of a pin dropping. Arbor held his breath and silently followed beside Emolien. After walking for a while, they arrived at the memorial arch at the entrance of the town. The sky was gloomy and dark, as if a thunderstorm was about to descend. Before the first drop of rain fell, Arbor took out a fire thunder umbrella from his inner world and handed it to Emolien. Emolien was a little amused. While opening the umbrella, his other hand was still holding her little hand. The raindrops fell in a split second, and the speed was a little shocking. The weather had been fine just a moment ago, but now it was as if a hole had been pierced through the sky. Torrential rain poured down on the Dou clan's trio. Even though the two young masters of the Dou family had activated their defensive barrier quickly, they were still unable to withstand the frightening rain. Half of their robes were still soaked. Dou Fenghua looked back silently. When she saw the crown prince and his wife snuggling together, she couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Who would have thought that the couple who weren't thought too highly of on Seacombe planet back then could actually reach this step now? Crack! A streak of lightning flashed across the horizon, completely dispersing the darkness in front of him. A ghastly pale old face abruptly appeared in front of third Miss Dou. Dou Fengqi wasn't mentally prepared at all. When she suddenly saw such a frightening old face appear in front of her, she couldn't help but shriek. She was so frightened that her entire body trembled, and her body slid limply to the ground. Dou Fengmian's eyes were sharp, and her hands were nimble. She hurriedly reached out to support her younger sister, and casually threw a streak of spiritual energy at that ghastly pale old face. Chapter 54:10. In the blink of an eye, more than half of that ghastly pale old face was charred by Dou Fengmian's spirit energy. Dou Fengqi trembled uncontrollably in fright, and scrambled to hide behind her two older brothers. Arbor focused and saw that the two young masters Dou were already locked in combat with the old zombie puppet. This old zombie puppet moved like an ordinary cultivator, above the 10th level of the spirit realm. Not only was it abnormally fast, but it could also smoothly release the light of spirit energy from its palms. Every time he saw the two young masters Dou evade the spirit energy released by the old zombie puppet, Arbor couldn't help but knit his brows. This zombie puppet didn't need to eat or drink, and wasn't afraid of pain or injury. Who could endure the two young masters Dou's reckless fighting style? It wouldn't take long for the two young masters Dou to retreat in defeat. Thus, Arbor looked up at Jojo's lotus. The latter gave him a reassuring look and released a golem with a wave of her hand. This person's appearance was strikingly similar to Lu Yizhi and moved very quickly. It leaped in front of the two young masters Do and intercepted the zombie puppet. Do Fengqi scrambled to roll in front of her two older brothers and cried out anxiously, "Eldest brother, didn't you say that these things are still under control?" Do Fengmian's expression was also very grave at this time, and she turned to whisper to the crown prince, "Your Highness, I think we have to speed up and go in to take a look." Our Do family had arranged for many people here before, and could basically control the abnormalities within a certain range. But now, why did this thing suddenly run to the village entrance to attack them? Didn't this mean that the Do family members left behind to guard this place might have already been encircled and annihilated by the zombie puppet? The three Do family members were burning with anxiety and hurriedly led the two inside. The golem with Lu Yizhi's appearance was left at the village entrance to continue dealing with the white-haired old zombie puppet. At the same time, a dazzling bolt of lightning glided across the sky above the Ministry of State Security's estate. This madam, unwilling to be left out, was currently lying on the brocade couch with her fragrant shoulders half exposed and her clothes half undone. Only after hearing the low reports from the servants outside the door did she finally smile. "Hurry up and bring her in. It's so cold. Don't let my beauty freeze." Madame Goen gently shook the round fan in her hand and smiled at the servant at the door. The servant answered, "Yes," and pushed the door open shortly after. A gust of cold wind blew in. Even though the madam was very charming, she couldn't help but shiver slightly. A trace of astonishment flashed through his heart. What's going on? Madame Goen thought to herself that she had never felt cold on a winter night before. Even if she was wearing a thin shirt, she was not afraid of the cold. What's going on today? She actually felt a trace of coldness from the depths of her heart. She hurriedly shook her head and suppressed the indescribable uneasiness in her heart. What was there to be afraid of? She had been waiting day and night for this day. Nothing could go wrong. Madame Goen stood up from the couch, and her soft silk sash fell to the ground. Barefooted, her figure graceful and elegant, she walked step by step from the brocade couch to the person who had been carried in through the door. Hee. Madame Goen smugly smiled at the unconscious person. "All right, you can all withdraw." She personally took that person and let him lean against her. Looking down, she saw a fair face with tightly shut starry eyes and tightly pursed thin lips. His handsome face was slightly pale, but he still had the bearing of a beauty. Chapter 54:11. Madame Gua's heart was abnormally happy, and she was a little excited. She reached out to stroke the man's fair face, and she muttered to herself, "Darling, this time, there's finally no one who's going to disturb us." The servants of the Ministry of National Security didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They silently hung their heads and quietly stayed by the door like statues. However, Madame Gua felt that these people were a bit of an eyesore, so she raised her hand and waved it at the servants on both sides. "All of you withdraw." Today was her big day of joy. She had looked forward to it for so long, and finally waited for this day with great difficulty. No one or anything could ruin her excellent mood. Madame Gua carried him in her arms, and she half dragged and half pulled him to the brocade couch to lie down. Her tender and sweet gaze lingered on the man's face, and she couldn't help but raise her hand, about to reach out to stroke him again. But she suddenly saw that the man on the brocade couch suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, that pair of pitch-black eyes were coldly staring at her, as if the person in front of him wasn't her Madame Gua, but merely a loathsome mangy dog. Madame Gua didn't expect him to suddenly wake up, and she suddenly jumped in fright. She couldn't help but be flabbergasted. She reflexively asked, "How did you wake up?" That's right, how did he wake up? Logically speaking, with his frail and ordinary body, after being drugged with this level of incapacitating drug, it was impossible for him to wake up without 3 days and 2 nights. Where exactly did this go wrong? Madame Gua glanced at fifth young master, puzzled. At this moment, the person she placed on the couch and carefully treated like a pearl or a treasure was precisely Ziqin Xiu, one of the Qin estate's 5th dukes. Qin Xiu coldly stared at her, his gaze as if he was looking at a corpse. This kind of gloomy gaze caused Madame Guo's heart to involuntarily jump, and she hurriedly teased, "Darling, why are you looking at me with such a gaze? Do you know how much I miss you in my heart? Don't worry, I've already ordered all the servants in the courtyard to leave. Tonight there's only the two of us in this small courtyard." The lady of the National Security Agency threw a coquettish glance at the fifth young master shamelessly. "You can open your arms and be with me at ease." Fifth young master Qin looked at her icily and sneered. "The Ministry of State Security? You're dead meat." He really didn't expect the Ministry of National Security to be so lustful. After the incident at the Qin estate, the Ministry of National Security had been sending people to inquire about him both openly and secretly. She thinks that the Qin estate has already become a stray dog, and the members of the Qin estate are completely powerless to resist, right? Therefore, he, a pitiful person with no cultivation base and no ability at all, was bound to become the property of the National Security Bureau, and could be tortured by her as she wished? "Darling." Madame Goen didn't know that she was about to die. She called her with a smile, and directly took off the fifth young master's outer shirt. "Darling, the night of spring is short. Let's not waste any more time. You're so disgusting." The fifth young master suddenly flung her hand away. Caught off guard, Goen was flung out and slammed into the opposite door frame. Clang! A loud sound rang out. As expected, the small courtyard was very quiet. Just as Goen said, she had chased out all the servants in her courtyard because they were a hindrance. Now, there was no one by Goen's side, and there was only her and Qin Xiu in the courtyard. Seeing that Qin Xiu's handsome face was still very seductive in anger, Goen swallowed her saliva. Chapter 54:12. She had yearned for the men of the Qin estate for a very, very long time. The fifth young master was elegant and simple, and Goen had always been unable to forget him. Today, she had obtained him by chance with great difficulty, and had long forgotten her parents' names. She was currently looking at the person in front of her in a daze, not even anticipating the impending danger, until an enormous force lifted her up and heavily smashed her onto the table. Then she fiercely tumbled to the ground. Madame Goen finally came back to her senses in astonishment, and hastily tried to crawl up from the ground. But unexpectedly, a staff heavily smashed into the back of her head. This hit stupefied Madame Goen. She also raised her head in confusion, only wanting to glance at that fifth young master. A pearwood staff had appeared in this fifth young master's hand at some unknown time, and he suddenly smashed it down. Even a level 12 great spiritual master, like Madame Goen, was smashed into a daze. Clutching her head full of blood, Madame Goen couldn't help but cry out, "What are you doing?" Qin Xiu looked at her expressionlessly, and suddenly reached out to grab her by the throat, his handsome face covered in a malicious expression. It was truly traveling far and wide in search of something, only to find it without any effort. He had wanted to kill this bitch for a very long time. Now that she had delivered herself to his doorstep, how could he not make a move? On the other side, Madame Goen felt her throat tighten as she stared incredulously at the man in front of her. She opened her mouth, but was unable to spit out a word. How was this possible? When they met at the banquet a while ago, this fifth young master was still an ordinary person, without any cultivation. But now, how could he suddenly clamp down on her? What was even more laughable was that she, a grand level 12 great spiritual master, actually couldn't break free from the hands of this ordinary person. This was simply the biggest joke in the world. Madame Goen did her best to inhale and exhale as she stammered. You let go. I have something to discuss. Who would have thought that fifth young master Qin would actually smile at her? That extremely cold expression actually had a near-fatal attraction, causing Madame Goen's struggling movements to involuntarily stifle. "Do you think I'm still that pitiful little thing from before that you can do as you please to me?" Qin Xiu's fingers tightly clutched Madame Goen's neck as he sneered. "You no longer exist. That lowly, pitiful, coward of her already completely no longer existed. Soon this matter would be resolved. All the humiliation and unbearable humiliation that this slut had brought upon him would eventually become a thing of the past. Goen, you will die in a different way. It will definitely be unforgettable. No, you can't kill me. I am Glory City's City Lord's adopted daughter. I am the current empress. Madame Gua's voice suddenly stopped, and she suddenly let out a miserable howl. The fifth young master had actually used an extremely cruel method to create this pair of hands. Goen was in so much pain that he couldn't stop trembling. He was on the verge of collapse. But then she heard that devilish voice ring in her ear. Didn't you want to play with me? This is only the first step. Dong 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 dong, dong 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 dong. What happened? The old woman who was on night duty walked over from the drooping flower gate. She rubbed her eyes as she walked and glared at the young eunuch, who was pounding on the garden gate in displeasure. What time is it now? Can't you wait until dawn to report? Nanny Lee, hurry up. Hurry and inform Her Majesty the Empress. Just say that something has happened to Madame Goen. The young eunuch who came to report couldn't help but shudder. Chapter 54:13. The main reason was that Madame Gua's dead face could be said to be terrible. Not to mention that there was no piece of good flesh on her body. The whole body was almost torn into pieces, and it was difficult to sew and mend them. The little eunuch vomited again and again at a glance, and he dared not close his eyes tonight. He was afraid that as soon as he closed his eyes, he would recall the horrible picture. Recently, Madame Gua came to the Empress every 2 or 3 days to chat with her, as if they were sisters. Although the Empress had always been very indifferent to Madame Gua, she had never hated her for the sake of the old city lord of Glory City. Every time Madame Gua came to talk about something, the Empress entertained her very well. Those who could work in the imperial palace were all sophisticated people, and they all saw it and remembered it in their hearts. They knew that although Madame Gua was not liked by the little crown princess, she still had some face in front of the Empress. When Mammy Lee heard that Madame Gua had an accident, she did not dare to neglect. She quickly took a token from the little eunuch and hurriedly turned to leave. It was raining heavily. Mammy Lee walked quickly to the door of the bedroom with a sullen face. At this time, the movement outside the door had alarmed several nannies on night duty. Mammy Lee quickly reported it to the supervisor nanny, who thought for a moment and said, "It's still early, and His Majesty hasn't got up yet. I'm afraid it's inconvenient to disturb him rashly. How about this? When it's a little bright, and His Majesty gets up to go to the court, we'll go in and report it to the Empress." Mammy Lee nodded repeatedly and deliberated with several nannies. Finally, she said to the supervisor nanny, "It's all up to you. His Majesty disliked it most that someone disturbed Her Majesty's rest." Even the matter of Madame Gua was certainly not an important matter in His Majesty's view, and he could not disturb the Empress at will. Several nannies stopped outside the hall and waited for the sound of rustling to come from the bedroom when it was a little bright. Then the supervisor nanny took the lead and knelt outside the hall to ask for an audience. Soon, the small door of the partition in the bedroom was opened from the inside. The head palace maid Pearl stood at the door with an indifferent expression and asked, "What is it?" Signaled by the supervisor Mammy Lee hurriedly crawled forward a few steps and respectfully handed over a waste token. Replying to Miss Jinju, "There is a piece of news from outside the palace. Madame Goen was killed in her residence for no reason. The steward of Madame Goen's residence specially sent someone to report this to Your Highness." Jinju's eyes flickered slightly. She glanced at Mammy Lee and said, "Come in with me." Mammy Lee bowed her head and followed Jinju into the bedroom in fear and trepidation. She carefully followed her step by step. Just as he stepped into the hall, he stole a glance at the indistinct figure behind the curtain. She then heard a cold and low voice. "It's so early in the morning. Why did you disturb the Empress?" Mammy Lee was so scared that her face turned pale. She quickly knelt on the ground and stammered, I deserve to die. There is a reason for this. There is a news outside the palace." Wuxia helplessly pulled the man's clothes and said, "Why are you yelling at her? Go to work. Don't you have to go to court early today?" After that, he said softly to Mammy Lee, who was kneeling outside the curtain and didn't dare to raise her head, "You don't have to panic. Just make it clear." Mammy Lee was relieved and replied in a low voice. Chapter 54:14. Reporting to Nyang Nyang, the sky has yet to brighten today. The steward of Madame Goen's mansion hurriedly sent the news to the palace. Madame was killed in her home late last night. No one knows why she died. The steward was very vague and didn't make it clear. The emperor took back his leg and looked at Mammy Li, who was kneeling on the ground, in astonishment. He waved his hand, and a black shadow drifted in front of him. Your Majesty, go and see where the little bastard and his wife are now. Wuxia helplessly twitched the corner of her mouth and glared at her husband with resentment. This guy said it in front of all the servants. Was his son shameless? The emperor touched his nose, rolled up his sleeves, and sat down beside the empress. He told Jinju, serve the meal. I'll accompany Wuxia to eat before leaving. Jinju responded with a smile and quickly left to serve the breakfast. Mammy Li knelt there with cold hands and feet. She didn't dare to raise her head, and her heart was beating fast. The empress's gentle voice came to her ears. Mammy, get up. Don't panic. Go and bring the person who sent the message here. This consort wants to ask him a few questions. Yes, yes. Mammy Li breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. When she stood up, she found that her legs and feet were a little weak. Mammy Li quickly stabilized her body, bowed, and pushed out the door. Soon, the little eunuch who delivered the message was brought to the emperor and the empress. At that time, the two had just had breakfast. Wuxia whispered to the emperor to hurry up and do the business. However, the man had to stay here and wait for the secret guard to bring the news back. The empress felt a little helpless, but she couldn't say anything in front of outsiders. She just glanced at him secretly. The little eunuch trembled as he repeated what he knew. This servant deserves to die. This servant went to the Ministry of National Security to take a look at Madame. Her tragic state was shocking. This servant did not dare to take another look. The empress nodded and comforted him in a warm voice. This is human nature. I just want to know the reason. I don't mean to blame you. You don't have to panic. Get up. The little eunuch was flattered and nodded repeatedly. He quickly stood up with a trembling body. The empress instructed the chief palace maid, Pearl, to take out some spirit coins to reward the little eunuch, and then ordered someone to send him out. A moment later, a hidden guard who had gone out to investigate the situation flashed into the bedchamber through a side door. He bowed and greeted, Your Majesty Nyang Nyang. The great emperor glanced at him. Pumpkin, tell me about the situation. The shadow guard said in a low voice. This subordinate went to take a look at Madame Goen's mansion. Indeed, as the news said, Madame Goen's death was quite tragic. All the skin on his body is broken, as if he had been sliced into pieces. Are the little brat and his wife in the Eastern Palace now? The empress reached out and patted the emperor. She pursed her lips in displeasure. How can you suspect your son and daughter-in-law? The emperor thought. With the little stoic daughter-in-law's methods, this isn't necessarily impossible. Madame Goen had offended the little stoic several times in the past. It was very likely that they didn't deal with her previously, because their daughter-in-law didn't have the time to deal with her. Now that the baby was born, and everything was fine, they might think of her when they were free. Shadow Guard Pumpkin glanced at the great emperor with an odd expression. He then respectfully replied, Your Majesty, the Crown Prince left the city in the middle of the night yesterday with the Crown Princess, and headed to East Peak Mountain in the western suburbs. They haven't returned to the palace yet. What? The great emperor and the empress were shocked. Nonsense. The great emperor cursed gloomily. Chapter 54:15. Why are these two brats so worrisome? The Crown Prince, this brat, was too deceitful. How could he not understand his wife's situation, after giving birth not long ago? Why did he bring his wife out of the palace for a stroll at East Peak Mountain? What good could happen if they sneaked off to East Peak Mountain in the middle of the night? When did they leave? Wuxia hastily questioned. Late at night. This subordinate speculates that it was around the same time as Madame Goen was killed. Goen's estate was in the east and west of the western suburbs, which meant that the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess couldn't have attacked Goen. These two brats were busy with other matters last night, and simply didn't have time to care about Goen. That was strange. Then who exactly did the National Security Agency die for? According to the hidden guard's description, it seemed that she had a deep-seated hatred for the person who killed Goen. The Empress and the Emperor looked at each other and saw a trace of graveness in each other's eyes. An unknown person infiltrated Goen's estate and killed Goen. There was something fishy about this matter. Your Majesty, please go to court first. I'll go to Goen's estate to see what's going on, Wuxia said softly. At the same time, thousands of corpse puppets surrounded a residential house in Maolin town. Bang! 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 They smashed the transparent defensive shield on the outside and let out roars one after another. This residence originally belonged to the mayor's family. Currently, the residence's main hall was packed with people. Other than Emolien, Arbor, and the three young masters and young misses of the Dou family, the old mayor of Maolin town was leading more than 100 townspeople to block the entrance with weapons in hand. They were afraid that those things outside would break in, so that they could resist them in time. Emolien beckoned to the old mayor. No need to be so nervous. Perhaps they were affected by the crown prince and crown princess's calm mood, but the originally tense crowd felt a bit better. The old mayor said shakily, "This commoner and the others truly deserve to die. We didn't expect to cause His Highness, and Her Highness the Crown Princess, to fall into such danger." No need to worry. The little stoic Crown Princess comforted him. She had reinforced the outside with dozens of defensive needle techniques. Within 6 hours, those things would not be able to break through the door. Besides, it wouldn't be difficult to bring these people away safely. They just wanted to clarify some things first. The old mayor continued in tears. Most of the townspeople in our town listened to Zhaoguang's nonsense and joined in. If it weren't for the two great masters of the Dou clan coming to remind us, we would still be in the dark. Dou Fengmian said with a cold face. Tian Yun is really abominable. He used bright light to attract some innocent people into the organization, and used them as test subjects for all kinds of drugs. I pity these innocent townspeople. Dou Fenghua sighed. By the time the Dou family found out, it was already too late. Most of the townspeople had already consumed Zhaoguang's improved medicine, becoming neither human nor ghost, and beginning to mutate. The old mayor wiped his tears and said, "The rest of us only dare to hide in the cellar during the day and sneak out at night. I want to escape, but I have no way to do so." Fortunately, the young masters of the Dou clan came and sent many people to help us. But this evening, for some reason, those corpse puppets suddenly became violent. During the resistance, the Dou clan sacrificed many people. There were also some corpse puppets that escaped from inside the town. I don't know if they have already left the town. Emolien nodded and summoned a shadow guard to instruct him in a low voice. Go to bed early tomorrow night. Chapter 54:16. Could it be that there's something outside the town that's attracting them? Dou Fengmian said in a low voice. Dou Fenghua nodded thoughtfully. That's very possible. After all, why would the zombies that had always been obediently wandering around the town suddenly become irritable and start a massacre this evening? There had to be a reason for this strange occurrence, but they didn't know for the time being. Arbor glanced at the sallow and emaciated old mayor. Then his gaze swept over the 100 or so townspeople behind him. These miserable Maolin town townspeople had been miserably deceived by the organization Bright Light. They originally thought that if they joined Bright Light, they wouldn't have to fear being bitten by zombies for the rest of their lives. Who knew that this organization itself was an organization of swindlers? They tricked them into joining Bright Light in order to use their families and friends as experimental subjects. Looking at their current dejected appearance like stray dogs, Arbor didn't need to think to know that many of their relatives and friends must have mutated into zombies. The old mayor of Maolin town suddenly knelt in front of Arbor and Emolien with a plop and said in a tearful voice, Your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess, please help us, the townspeople. He truly regretted his past actions now. If he had known that Bright Light was so vicious, he would have given these townspeople a warning even if he had to sacrifice his life. Those pitiful young children were transformed into corpse puppets, and they didn't even have the chance to refuse. This was all his fault. He hadn't dissuaded them and pulled them out of that fiery pit. Arbor signaled to the side with his eyes. Immediately, A hidden guard walked forward and single-handedly lifted up the sobbing old mayor from the ground. He shouted in a low voice, "Stand properly." The old man was so frightened that his legs went weak, and he stood there stiffly. "Don't worry, old man," Emolien said faintly. "We came here this time to eradicate this malignant tumor bright light." The rumbling outside suddenly grew louder. It sounded like thousands of zombies were attacking a part of the defensive barrier with all their might. It was as if they were trying their best to break the defensive barrier in front of them within a few minutes. Yuba walked in, bowing to Emolien Arbor with a strange expression. "Crown Princess, Your Highness." The corpse puppets are organized in a well-trained manner and are launching a fierce attack on the defensive barrier in the south. If this continues, I'm afraid the defensive formation will be completely destroyed in less than half an incense stick's worth of time. The old mayor and others were so scared that their faces turned pale. They couldn't stop trembling. Could it be that they were about to clash with their friends and family? Over the past few days, they had watched their relatives and friends turn into zombies, walking corpses one by one. They felt extremely uncomfortable in their hearts. Now they had to kill their own relatives and friends with their own hands. How could they accept this? Arbor glanced at them and asked, "Would you like to stay in the storage talisman for a while?" The old mayor and the others nodded repeatedly. Instead of letting them watch their relatives and friends die one by one in front of him, he was powerless to save them. It was better not to see, not to hear, not to think. Most of the townspeople were very willing to hide in the storage talisman. Seeing this, Arbor put the old mayor and the townspeople into the storage talisman. Something came up at the last minute. Tomorrow afternoon, around 4 o'clock. Chapter 54:17. The shouts and roars from outside traveled into everyone's ears. Sir Jojo and Prince Emo met each other's eyes. Emolien grasped her small hand and asked with a wink, "Wifey, are we going to charge out and fight?" The little stoic glanced at him and silently gave him a look that said, "You're a fool." Prince Emo was taken aback. He then glanced at his wifey's small face and inexplicably didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What was going on? Wifey was looking at him like he was an idiot. Right Arbor was expressionless. His small hand darted out of his sleeve and abruptly released little Fatty and the others from the star domain. "We came out to stretch our limbs." The little stoic coughed lightly and said with a serious expression, "In reality, it wasn't a good idea to be cooped up in the star domain all day long. If they cultivated there every day, they would become stupid from holding it in. So when she said that she let them out to fight or something, they should find it very interesting if they thought about it from other people's perspective. Besides, what kind of joke was this? Sir Jojo wasn't a fool like her husband. How could he foolishly walk out and allow so many zombies to besiege him? Heh, a group of people in the star domain would grow moldy if they had nothing better to do. It was simply great to come out and fight. As expected, when Qi Xianxian and the others heard this, their spirits were instantly roused. Fighting and stretching their limbs were what they liked the most. On the other hand, the Dou family's third miss, Dou Fengqi, who was standing on the side, couldn't help but flash her eyes. She whispered sourly, "The crown princess is truly extravagant. She packed so many helpers in her portable spatial spirit tool." The Dou family's eldest young master, Dou Fengmian, knitted his brows and glared warningly at Dou Fengqi. This third sister had always been a fussy person. Back on Seikong planet, she had clashed with the little crown princess several times. Fortunately, she was just a little girl's jealousy, so it wasn't a big deal. Moreover, as she grew older, third sister's temper had slightly curbed. Eldest young master Dou warned her, because he didn't want third sister to make a mistake again. She didn't want third sister to listen to that strange muttering. Today's crown princess is not someone she, a little girl from the Dou family, can make up nonsense at will. Presumably, Dou Fengqi also knew that she had said the wrong thing. As soon as she finished speaking, she tightly shut her mouth. On the other side, Qi Xianxian and the others were released by Arbor. As soon as Mata left the star field, he could not help but rub his fists together. He said with a smile, "Jojo, have you dealt with those outside?" Arbor nodded. "They've all turned into zombies. Hurry up and put on your armor." Alright. Everyone took out a complete set of protective armor from their inner worlds and equipped themselves from head to toe. Qi Xianxian wielded her purple light treasured sword, while Ko Hongwen carried his double-headed hammer. The couple stood at the very front and grinned. Let's go. Clean up those outside. Arbor thought for a moment and could not help but frown slightly. He paused and said, pay attention to your own defenses. If you can capture them alive, keep a few to test the reaction of the antidote. However, he didn't know if the second stage of the antidote developed by Huang He and the others would have any major effect on these people who had completely transformed into zombies. After all, strictly speaking, they were already considered dead. The second stage of the antidote developed by Huang He was only effective on some injured living bodies. Don't worry, Jojo. Qi Xianxian raised her small hand wrapped in armor and waved at Arbor. Chapter 54:18. When Dofengmian and Dofenghua saw this, they hurriedly said, we'll go help too. Then they turned to look at their third sister, Do Fengqi, and walked out with Qi Xianxian and the others. Although Do Fengqi was unwilling, she did not dare to refute her brother's words. She stole a glance at Arbor and followed them out with a drooping mouth. Once they walked out of the door, a gust of wind blew. A rotten stench mixed with the wind blew straight at his face. Through the defensive array, they could see over 1,000 strangely shaped zombies blocking the door. One after another, they dug at the defensive barrier, making continuous thumping sounds. Qi Xianxian hooked her finger at Little Fatty and whispered into his ear. Little Fatty Ko Hongwen nodded and turned to wave at Ma Ta. Brother, you two go stand guard over there. Brother Duanmu, go to the left. Xianxian, open a door on the defensive barrier later and let them in. When Do Fengqi was inside, she always wanted to diss Arbor. Now that she was out, she did not need to care about the crown prince anymore. She suddenly mocked. Open a door? Open what door? This defensive array can't hold on much longer. If you dig another hole in the middle, you won't be able to defeat those zombies one by one. If the defensive barrier collapses when the ones outside swarm in, it will be too late. Qi Xianxian and the others completely ignored her. After discussing among themselves, they nodded and went to stand at their respective positions. When Do Fengqi saw this, she could not help but make her presence known. Hey, didn't you hear what I said? Third sister. Do Fengmian glared at her warningly. Do Fengqi was gloomy and shut her mouth in embarrassment. For the crown prince's sake, Big Brother told her to restrain herself from dissing the crown princess. However, these people were merely some of the crown princess friends. What was so bad about dissing them? Big Brother was too careful. In any case, their Do family was not a small family in the Divine Continent. She was the third miss of the Do family branch, so why couldn't she say a few words? And what she said wasn't wrong. The defensive barrier was already on the verge of collapsing. If Qi Xianxian and the rest continued to act recklessly, it was only a matter of time before it collapsed. Under the pressure of so many corpse puppets, everyone might not be able to bear the consequences. The corners of Do Fengqi's mouth drooped as she looked coldly at the backs of Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty. His eyebrows suddenly twitched. The two of them moved nimbly and jumped forward without saying a word. The double-headed hammer in Little Fatty's hands smashed a hole in the defensive barrier in front of him. Qi Xianxian, who was standing beside Little Fatty, hurriedly threw out a defensive talisman to reinforce the defensive barrier. In the blink of an eye, a zombie bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws jumped into the hole with a bang. Kill! Qi Xianxian raised her hand and commanded. Mata, who was standing on the right, flew forward with a long spear in his hand. With a crash, he sent the corpse puppet's head flying. The degree of perfection of this coordination was just right. It was done in a single breath without any changes in the middle. The second zombie stepped on the corpse of the first zombie and jumped in. Qi Xianxian shouted again, Kill! In a matter of minutes, it was finished off by the azure mist sword on the left. Duanmu Qing kept his sword and looked at the hole in the defensive barrier expressionlessly. At this moment 2 to 3 zombie puppets rushed in from the hole. They did not even need Qi Xianxian to give any orders. Chapter 54:22. By now, Emolian had already ground away the last strand of consciousness that these people had left. Currently, they were wrapped in copper skin and turned into mechanical puppets. Like walking corpses, they only obeyed their master's orders. These two mechanical puppets weren't slow, and one of them jumped all the way into the rundown temple. Arbor looked up and asked absent-mindedly, "What happened to Fan Gu's leg?" "Who knows?" Emolian also looked indifferent. "She probably hurt herself when I sent them out to do something last time." "What an idiot. She can't even handle such a small matter." Qi Xianxian and the rest were a bit puzzled, and they silently glanced at the Crown Prince. From what they knew, the Crown Prince had made many mechanical puppets, but he seemed to treat a few of them rather badly. The big treasure he gave Jojo was noisy all day, but the couple didn't seem to dislike it. How would they know that there really was a knack for this? Luigi and the rest were truly mechanical puppets that had been refined into human puppets. They were neither alive nor dead, and had suffered all kinds of pain and torture until now. Arbor had only asked casually, and nodded when he heard the Crown Prince's words. The group quietly waited outside the rundown temple for news. After Fan Gu and Fan Xioha, the two mechanical puppets, went in, they didn't move at all. Half an hour had passed as the sun rose high in the sky. Emolian couldn't help but frown. "So useless." Arbor nodded and released several poison-tailed butterflies with a wave of his hand. He let the little butterflies go in to take a look first. They were small and didn't attract too much attention when they flew in from the corners. The main reason was that it was completely empty outside, which was a little surprising. They originally thought that the inside and outside of this rundown temple would be completely surrounded by zombies, but unexpectedly, not a single zombie could be seen. It was indeed very strange. After a moment, Arbor received information from the poison-tailed butterflies. "There's no one inside." Arbor turned to look at Emolian, who was standing beside him. "Fan Gu and Fan Xioha, those two things, are also gone." Two such large mechanical puppets had inexplicably disappeared without a trace. This situation made everyone even more vigilant. What did this mean? This meant that there was definitely a powerful force hidden in this dilapidated temple. The two mechanical puppets were quietly dragged to an unknown place. There was definitely something strange going on in the depths of this dilapidated temple. Arbor glanced at the dilapidated temple and snorted coldly. She exchanged glances with her husband, who turned to look at her. The two of them nodded at the same time. Arbor raised her hand, and 3 spirit stone cannons appeared beside her. A few hidden guards swiftly went up. Under the young Crown Prince Consort's nod, they loaded the spirit stones one by one, and pushed the spirit stone cannon 100 meters forward. He suddenly turned the muzzle of the cannon, and after a few rumbling sounds, the entire door of the ruined temple was blasted flat by the spirit stone cannon. The temple door was wide open, and a burst of smoke rose from all directions. The earth and rocks in front of the door had completely collapsed, revealing a large dark hole. Looking in from here, he could see that the stone floor of the ruined temple had been bombarded by the spirit stone cannons. There were several rows of holes, and there were faint flames floating out from them. Arbor raised her hand and waved it, sweeping away the faint smell of smoke in front of her. "Continue." Emolian looked at the entrance of the ruined temple and calmly gave the order. Thus, the secret guards once again took out handfuls of spirit stones and threw them in. The muzzle of the cannon was aimed at the earth and brick walls on both sides of the ruined temple. Chapter 54:26. This was no joke. If he slacked off a little, this special-grade zombie might harm his family and friends. No matter how much she sympathized with this young Master Wei Su, she couldn't be merciful to him. Since things had already come to this point, then Wei Su couldn't stay any longer. As the dignified young master of Medicine King Island, if he still had some sanity left at this time, he would certainly not want to become a walking corpse and be willing to become Tianyun's lackey. Xiao Mu turned her head to meet Emolian's eyes before giving him a slight nod. Emolian immediately opened her inner world and took out Raven Moon. Without any explanation, she thrust it straight at the neck of the young master of Medicine King Island. Wei Su's figure suddenly disappeared from where he stood. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned. Arbor jerked his head up and looked up. His scalp tingled slightly, and he subconsciously shouted, "Disperse." Wei Su had unknowingly moved to the top of the stone wall, and suddenly swooped down with extreme speed, a claw directly tearing at the little fatty's head. Clang! In the blink of an eye, the little fatty took out a black pot lid from his inner world, and quickly blocked Wei Su's claw. With Wei Su's claw, a crack appeared in the pot lid. The little fatty was so frightened that he hurriedly opened the pot lid to take a look and angrily cursed. This was a spirit tool he had plundered during his training. Although it was only a pot, it had been with him for a long time. Before he met Jojo and the others, when he was training alone in Shuntian Prefecture, it was all thanks to this pot's accompaniment. But now, this pot's lid had cracked just like that, and it was even torn apart by that rank 3 zombie's claw. His heart ached for the little fatty. At that time, Emolien's crisscrossing sword energy had already reached Wei Su. When Wei Su's figure disappeared again, Arbor pursed his lips and immediately used the strand of time energy stored in his body. Wei Su's figure that was just about to disappear suddenly paused in the air for a few seconds, until that sword chi ruthlessly hit his body. Wei Su's entire body was thrown out, and he slammed hard into the stone door behind him. Only then did he realize that he had been hit hard by someone. Wei Su crawled up from the ground with difficulty. Her grayish-white eyes looked in the direction of Arbor and Emolien with slight confusion. She subconsciously took a few steps back. Emolien whispered to Arbor, "He may still have a little bit of consciousness left." However, this weak consciousness was no longer of any use to Wei Su herself. Most of his mind had already been controlled, and his entire mind was probably in a muddled state right now. Arbor clenched his fists tightly, pursed his lips, and coldly looked at Wei Su, who was struggling to get up from the ground. Out of instinct, Wei Su felt that the two people in front of him were not to be trifled with. He had no idea what had just happened. Actually, Jojo had used that bit of time energy to slow down time for a few seconds. And it was during this period of delay that Crown Prince Emo cooperated exceptionally well, swiftly sending Wei Su flying with a hack. He had solved the little fatty's predicament, and also struck Wei Su hard. However, the young island master no longer felt any pain. After he got up from the ground in a daze, he raised his hand to support his broken arm and straightened it. Emolien couldn't help but narrow her eyes and look Wei Su up and down. She whispered to Arbor, "Be careful." Chapter 54-27. Looks like this zombie puppet's level might have broken through to the godly realm, Emolien said with a serious expression. Arbor nodded with a stoic expression. This zombie puppet can actually teleport. It's probably a new skill it obtained after becoming a zombie. Although the range of each teleport was not large, it was fast and could be used multiple times. At least from Arbor's point of view, this special rank 3 zombie puppet was comparable to a Mystique Venerable Realm expert in terms of movement and speed. Wei Su's cultivation level was definitely not low when he was alive. After becoming a zombie and going through multiple transformations, his current strength was not to be underestimated. The underground passage was narrow, so Arbor naturally could not use the Spirit Stone Cannon to bombard it. If the passage collapsed, he and Jojo's Lotus would have to eat a mouthful of dust. Just thinking about it was annoying. He's trying to run. The little fatty with a bowl cut suddenly shouted as he followed behind the two of them. Lu Yu and the others looked at him, and could not help but facepalm. This guy had an iron pot lid on his head, which made him look rather comical. As soon as the little fatty finished speaking, Emolien grabbed Arbor's hand and ran toward the stone door. When the others saw this, they hurriedly followed and rushed into the stone door. This young island master probably left some brains. Qi Xianxian ran with the others and could not help but say, "Look at him, look at him. He seems to be afraid of the Crown Prince and Jojo. He's running away." Everyone wanted to laugh when they heard this. However, Xianxian's narration was quite vivid. The zombie puppet was running away. It ran in a crooked manner, as if it was in a hurry. It looked like it really wanted to get rid of Emolien and Jojo as soon as possible. Unfortunately, those two were very difficult to deal with. They were the ones who tricked others all day long, and were never tricked by others. It would be extremely difficult for the corpse puppet to break free from the two of them. Husband, quick, use the spirit locking rope. Her husband had a spirit locking rope in his hand, so no one could escape. Her husband had taken it back from the 17th floor of the Tower of Punishment. After he had improved it many times, the current God locking rope could probably lock up anyone below the transcendent God realm. Hearing this, Emolien hurriedly took out a black iron chain from her inner world and threw it out without saying a word. The chain was originally only the size of a palm, but after it was flung away by Emolien, it extended for about 100 meters with a whoosh. Like a lasso, it wrapped around Wei Su tightly in an instant. The pitiful Wei Su had been running forward when this ornament suddenly appeared on his neck. His body was dragged forward, and his head smashed onto the ground, falling down. Arbor quickly stepped forward and added 10 gravity talismans to the corpse puppet without saying a word. Everyone watched as the zombie puppet, which had just gotten up, fell head first onto the ground with a thud. Arbor heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly said to the secret guard behind him, "Tie it up and bring it back." She wanted to see if capturing Wei Su, a rank 3 special class zombie, would incur the wrath of the entire Tianyan Empire. The more they captured, the better. When the time came, they would deal with all these high-level zombies and see if they could extract anything useful from them to speed up the production of the antidote. Wei Su was completely incurable now, but perhaps in the near future, they would be able to save more Wei Su. Arbor clenched his fists and took a few steps forward. At this time, the group had already entered the stone door. Chapter 54-29. A hint of anger flashed through Emolien's eyes. Look, these people who used to live normal lives were now ruined by Tianyan. Wei Su was like this, and so were all the townspeople of Maolin Town. Just how many people was Tianyan going to harm before they were willing to give up? Roar! Wei Su let out a deep roar from the depths of his throat, and his limbs suddenly contracted. The God-locking rope also suddenly contracted around his body. Arbor raised his eyebrows slightly and stared at Wei Su's sudden bone-shrinking appearance. He hooked a stream of water spirit energy between his fingers. Could it be that the young island master of Medicine King Island also obtained a special ability before he turned into a corpse? Something like a bone-shrinking skill? She suddenly released a strong stream of water spirit energy towards the person in front of her. In the blink of an eye, Wei Su suddenly jumped up from the ground. He couldn't get rid of the God-locking rope binding his body. After all, the God-locking rope was a divine weapon made by Emolien. It could be long or short, big or small. No matter how his bones contracted, the God-locking rope couldn't possibly let him escape without Jojo's Lotus Divine Sense undoing it. However, Wei Su's current appearance was indeed a little strange. Although his body was bound by the God-locking rope, his hands became longer and turned outwards under the chains. His two deformed hands grabbed towards Arbor's neck. The water spirit that Xiaomu released was struck by the fire spirit that Wei Su flicked out, and the two spirits formed a powerful current in midair. Then, they separated upon contact, flickering and extinguishing like fireworks. Emolien frowned slightly. She flashed in front of Jojo and used her sword to knock away the deformed and elongated left hand that was rushing towards Jojo. Looking at Wei Su's left hand now, it was completely different from a normal human's hand. The collision just now was like hitting an iron plate. It was so solid that it was surprising. Emolien couldn't help but frown again and glanced coldly in Wei Su's direction. This Wei Su, after turning into a corpse, could still use the fire spirit box. It was indeed unexpected. Arbor also noticed this. Therefore, a rank 3 special zombie puppet was completely different from other zombie puppets. It was probably close to becoming a perfect zombie. Therefore, it was a little difficult to deal with it. Arbor tossed over several binding talismans. The light of the talismans flowed and formed a binding talisman array around the corpse puppet, firmly fixing it within. At the same time, Emolien flicked his wrist and wrapped the spirit-locking rope around his 2 arms. As such, the ends of the 3 god-locking ropes were held in place by the 3 young hidden guards. Even though Wei Su had immense strength after his mutation, he was still like a trapped beast, completely unable to move. Wei Su kept struggling and twisting his body, howling and screaming. The old mayor, who was sitting paralyzed on the side, had long been frightened by the scene in front of him. He couldn't even speak. This was simply too terrifying. Who would have thought that these ignorant villagers would actually change into such a terrifying monster after joining Zhaoguang? His whole body trembled slightly, and he couldn't help but shrink back. Seeing this, Mata turned around and comforted him. "Don't be afraid, old man. This corpse puppet is already under control. It won't jump out to harm people again." The old mayor nodded fearfully and wiped away the tears in his eyes. He sat there absent-mindedly, staring blankly at the corpses of the townsfolk locked in the earth cage. With a glance, he discovered that his daughter-in-law and 2 nephews were also locked in the cage. Chapter 5436. Others must also have nowhere to seek redress for their grievances. For relatives like this who bully others, I would have dealt with them 800 years ago. It was impossible to allow them to jump up and down until now. Arbor continued coldly. This person is so disgusting, she should be punished. The crown prince hurriedly nodded. Yes. Families have family rules, and countries have national laws. Goen arbitrarily detained people in the cellar at home, which is a violation of national laws, and must be severely punished. White Empress. The Empress now felt a little empathetic and understood His Majesty's feelings. The son was completely from the wife's country, and whatever the wife said was right. This was really worrying. Goen was already dead, how could they punish her? We must seize Goen's title and confiscate all her assets. The crown prince's handsome face was cold as he said righteously, "Part of it will go to the national treasury. Part of it will go to the victim's family. Comfort the victim's family." When the young crown prince consort heard this, she nodded in full agreement. Her small face was taut. The crown prince is extremely right. Mother, you mustn't shield them for the sake of Glory City's and grandfather's face, unable to differentiate right from wrong. White Empress, actually it's not that serious. The old steward of Goen's residence couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. He knelt on the ground and cried out, "Her Majesty is Madam's foster sister, and has accompanied Madam for decades." Hearing this, the little crown princess was furious. "You're still playing the sympathy card at this time." The old steward hurriedly cried out miserably, "But Madam is now dead, and died in such an undignified manner. If this matter is made public first, it will smear the royal family's face, and second, it will be hard to explain to the old city lord." The little crown princess said coldly, "This is what you get for doing wrong. She only has herself to blame, so don't blame the heavens for being blind. If everyone is like her, relying on His Majesty and the Empress's power to snatch men and women from the common people, then how will the common people live? Will they still be able to live in peace? A man can't stand without integrity, and a country can't stand without integrity. If I were mother, I would throw this person to the city gate and whip her corpse for 3 days as a warning." The Empress suddenly widened her eyes. She now firmly believed His Majesty's words. No wonder His Majesty had a headache every time he saw his daughter-in-law. She was really a troublesome little girl. "If anyone dares to use my name to do evil deeds outside, I will punish them, and make sure that their entire family will have to bear the consequences. Let them know that it's not easy to be my relative." Crown Prince was speechless. The Empress. Everyone was speechless. It was true. Being a relative of the little crown princess was never easy. Everyone knew that. Jojo. Empress Bai stuttered. "The National Security Agency has indeed done wrong. But now, She has only herself to blame for her own death. If we throw the corpse out and whip it, it's not very respectful to the corpse. Furthermore, Glory City would lose face. Prince Mo's mouth twitched. See, Imperial Mother is stuttering now. She's regretting it now. Previously, she had seriously called the husband and wife over to see if they had anything to do with this matter. Hehe. She's unlucky. Empress Bai was extremely regretful. She hurriedly blinked her eyes and said, "How about this? We'll do as the Crown Prince said, take away her title, and move her out of the capital for burial. What do you think?" Chapter 54-43. Hu Jinshan lowered his head to look at himself, then glanced at the little stoic's indignant expression. He couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Don't worry, Jojo. He probably can't break free for a while. I reckon that after baby Mo completes his advancement, everyone will be able to move freely." Arbor naturally knew that everything would be fine after his son completed his advancement. She was just indignant. Humph. What right did a godly venerable realm cultivator have to stroll around outside? Right now, her star domain was slowly transforming into the holy domain. From the looks of it, it probably wouldn't be completed in a day or two. Didn't this mean that she would be stuck here like an idiot for several days and nights? This was simply preposterous. She was the omnipotent Jojo, the little master of the star domain. How could she be stuck here without being able to move? Sir Jojo struggled angrily, but he still couldn't break free of the binding force on him. She looked up and saw that the sea had regained its tranquility. The fish in the sea had all quieted down, and didn't poke their heads out again. She couldn't help but feel a bit anxious. In her fit of anger just now, she carried the calligraphy treasure back to the star domain. Jojo's lotus was still pacing back and forth outside the palace. Her husband definitely couldn't enter the star domain now, so he was probably fretting and anxious. Who knew what kind of storm he would stir up? The little crown princess guess was right. The crown prince was already burning with anxiety, and had nowhere to vent his irritable anger. He was practically about to flip the entire eastern palace upside down. For the past 3 days, the servants would make a detour whenever they saw the crown prince. No one dared to provoke the crown prince at this time. His Highness the Crown Prince was simply like a rampaging dragon these days. He disliked whoever he saw and attacked whoever he saw without exception. His Highness even had the underworld court guards investigate the family affairs of all his uncles, brothers, and aunts. After a round of investigation, he discovered that the second cousin of the Duke of Eternal Peace's concubine's brother was also an unruly person. 2 years ago, he snatched a farmer's daughter and almost caused her death. The great crown prince finally found a way to vent his belly full of anger. Not only did he call the crown prince of the Eternal Peace Duke, Missouri Lu, he even ordered him to hand over the second cousin of the Eternal Peace Duke's concubine's brother to be dealt with within 3 days. This was simply too much. As a result, the entire imperial family was in a state of panic. The crown prince of the Eternal Peace Duke was innocent. Mo Lu returned home in tears with a dumbfounded look on his face, complaining to his father, the Duke of Eternal Peace, who knew that he would be involved in such a shocking matter. The second cousin of the Duke of Eternal Peace's concubine's brother, this Mo Lu, was really a relative that was completely unrelated to him. If the crown prince was looking for the second cousin of his concubine's brother, then he could still accept it. In the end, the crown prince went to look for Mo Lu's father, the second cousin of the Duke of Eternal Peace's concubine's brother. The crown prince was too embarrassed to call his royal uncle over and reprimand him, so he vented his anger on his own brother. This is really too much. Mo Lu was depressed for 2 whole days. After going around in circles a few times, he finally dragged out that scourge of a second cousin brother and helped the crown prince vent his anger. This matter immediately aroused the vigilance of everyone both inside and outside the court, especially the imperial family and the relatives of the imperial family.